So good evening to everyone, and B'shus, the Morad Asa, my dear friend Rav Kanai, and Kahal Kadosh. Special thanks to Menachem. I don't know whether everybody knows Menachem. Robert Schrader, my dear friend. We spend 5 minutes every morning together in his car on the way to shul. When I go to shul, Menachem is already after davening and probably after his shiur. And we spend 5 minutes every day, usually with a Dvar Torah or a Shaila. And thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here together with you this evening. So as the Rav commented, yes, we are reaching a climax. And Sunday is Shloshis Yemei HaKabbalah, which is the last stage of preparation to Kabbalat Hatorah. And many of the great Gedolim throughout the ages saw somewhat of a connection between Memtet Yemei Asvirah, the 49 days of counting, and the 48 traits and attributes of acquiring Torah, Memches Kinyonei Torah. And Rabbi Saul Salanter and the Chidusharim before him maintained that each and every day of the Svira should be dedicated to the acquisition of one of those special factors of Kinyonei Torah. But we don't have much time left. So what is the most important message to convey? And what are the most central themes approaching Ma'amad Har Sinai and Kabbalat Hatorah? So I want to share a story that I shared many times in the past year and a half since my late father, Zecher Tzaddik Levrocha, passed away. And every year, approaching Shavuos, these emotions and sentiments come back to me. My late father was a tremendous Zilui, a gewaltige Talmid Chochem. I don't know whether any of you knew my father. I think Menachem met my father numerous times, and maybe Moshe did. He was a tremendous Talmid Chochem and a very special person. The Moshe Feinstein, many years ago, when he was a younger man, tried to coax him into Rabbonis, but my father didn't feel it's for him, and my father was a businessman. But he was a tremendous masmid and a real Ilui in a Talmid Chochem. Chag Shavuos, 1944, he arrived in Birkenau. 1 week later, the great Kloisenberger Rebbe arrived in Birkenau. My father didn't know the Rebbe, and he very much wanted to know him. And he heard that the Kloisenberger Rebbe is in one barracks, one building right next to where he was. But the Auschwitz Birkenau was nothing like the Radisson or the Hilton or the Sheraton. If you didn't like your room, you couldn't go to reception and ask for another room. It didn't work that way. So in the middle of the night, my father sneaked out of the barrack and he went into the next building and he looked for someone named Sender Hollander. He found Sender Hollander and he told him, "Your son is in the next building together with me. And I assume you would like to be together with your son because he really would like to be together with you. So if you wish, we could swap places. But if we do, you need to remember that from this moment on, your name is Moshe Weiss and my name would be Sender Hollander." And they swapped places. In the morning, my father approaches the great Rebbe and he expresses his simcha, how happy he is to be close to him. And the Rebbe frowns down upon my father and he says, "Bocher, the mindset that etwas helfen, said the Gun nicht helfen." Did anybody understand what I just said? So the Rebbe told my father, "If you think it's going to do you any good, it ain't going to do you any good." To which my father responded, "Avada wird es mir helfen. Ich will mit wem zu reden and learning. Of course it's going to do me good. I'll have with whom to talk and learning, and the Rebbe was astounded and taken aback, and he said, Bucher, bist in Auschwitz, and you want to talk and learning? You're in Auschwitz, and you want to talk and learning? To which my father responded, yes, if we won't talk and learning, how will we prevail? How will we ever make it? How will we make it out of hell? And the Rebbe hugged my father and embraced him. And for the next 11 months, they talked and learning. And for the next 50 years, they talked and learned. And my father was 16 years old at the time, a young boy. But he felt that if we won't talk and learning, how will we ever make it? He felt in the depth of his heart that that is our only chance. If we won't talk and learning, how will we prevail? And they talked and learning, and they talked, and they talked, and they talked. And our people 2,000 years ago had the same intuitive feeling. If we won't talk and learning, how will we ever make it? So we made it through the ages. And that's a miracle. So many times I say to my Talmidim in my shul and my yeshivas and elsewhere, by nature, by the course of human events, the Jews should have been 3 pages in the history books. Somewhere between the Roman Empire and the ancient Trojans, there would be 3 pages about an ancient people that called themselves the Jews, and they claimed to be descendants of the patriarchs, and as many other peoples and empires having their moment of glory under the sun and then sinking into oblivion and finding their space in history books. But we're around. We're not history. We have a great deal of history, but we ain't history. We're around. And we're doing just fine. With all our problems and trials and tribulations, we're doing quite fine. Back in the land of our forefathers, Be'eretz HaKadosh HaChavicha, growing in numbers, growing in strength, growing in our devotion and dedication to Torah, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a miracle. And Rabbi Yankov Emden wrote 300 years ago, in the introduction to his magnificent siddur. Probably some of you are familiar with the siddur Beis Yankov, the Emden siddur, one of the most famous siddurs. And in the introduction to his siddur, which is called Sulam Beis El, Sulam, the Yankov Emden writes, and I quote, Chai Roishi, which is an expression of a shavua. Ka'asher ani mizbainen, בקיום עם ישראל בגולוס, שאחד בין 70 זאבים, גדול הנס הזה בעיניי יוסם הכל הניסים שנעשו לאבותינו במצרים, על הים ובארץ ישראל. When I just observe and think about the mere existence of our people, in my eyes this is a greater miracle than all the miracles that were performed in Egypt, on the sea, and entering Eretz Yisrael. And I wonder, that's a statement that Rabbi Yankov Emden wrote 300 years ago. What would he write today? I wonder. After all that has transpired in the past 300 years, after all the nisyonos and the rivers of blood and tears, after all the challenges in ruchnius, in spirituality, and in gashmius, all the nisyonos of Klal Yisrael with various movements, that's the reform movements and all different challenges, and topping it all, the Holocaust, the greatest human tragedy in the history of the world. What would Rabbi Yankov Emden write today? I could only guess he would probably write, Gadol hanes hazeh b'einai yoter mibriat shamayim va'aretz. What else could he write? And we're around. And how did this miracle come to be? Mod gereten lernen. Yes, we talked and learned. Because for thousands of years, dispersed amongst all different nations and peoples and tribes and languages, we had nothing in common. Eretz Yisrael was with us, but it was a dream, and a somewhat distant dream. A dream, an aspiration, a hope. But what did we have in common? No flag, no banner, no army, not even a common language. Because throughout the ages, we davened in the same language, but we didn't converse. We had no common language. The only thing we had in common, we talked and learned. That's all we had in common. The Bavli and the Yerushalmi, the Rambam and the Ramban, the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, that is all we had, and that is what kept us going throughout the ages. So the Gemara tells the story, Bishat HaGezerah, going back to the terrible days of the Roman Empire and the destruction of Bayis Sheni. And Rebbe Kiva is Makel Kehelois Barabim, the Maitzoi Papos ben Yehuda. So Papas was a friend of Rebbe Kiva, and he turns to Rebbe Kiva and he asks him, Akiva, aren't you afraid? How do you dare to bring people together before Hesia and you're teaching Torah? Aren't you afraid? And Rebbe Kiva says, of course I'm afraid. How could one not be afraid? Aval emsholach hamashal lemeh hadavar domeh. And Rebbe Kiva gives a mashal, a parable. The fox is taking a stroll on the riverbank, and he sees the fish seem to be agitated and nervous, and they're swimming around frantically. And the fox turns to the fish and he asks him, what's happening? You seem to be afraid. And the fish say, don't you see the fishermen out there? They put nets in the water and they're trying to fish us out of the water. So the Shual, the fox, tells the fish, what's your problem? Ritzonchem? So why do you come up here? There are no nets out here. And the fish say to the fox, אתה הוא שאומרים עליך פיקח שבחיות אתה, לא פיקח אתה, טיפש אתה. Are you the one that is said to be so clever? You seem to be a fool. ומה במוקם חיוסינו אנו מתיירים אם נפרוש ממנה על אחת כמה וכמה. It is in the water that we live. The water is what sustains us, and we are afraid. If we leave the water, ein tochelet ve'ein tikva, we don't stand a chance. So Rabbi Kiva tells Papus, ומה כאשר אנחנו עוסקים בתורה, שנאמר בה כי היא חייכם, ואורך ימיכם, ואנו מתיירים אם נפרוש ממנה על אחת כמה וכמה. So Rabbi Kiva teaches us, as long as we are immersed in Torah, we're like fish in the water. That's our life. That's the oxygen we breathe. Every day in the morning in Birkot Kriyat Shema we say, Ki heim chayenu bo'erech yameinu. And if we leave Torah, we are like fish that left the water. We cannot live without Torah. Fish cannot live without water. And I'm sure that each and every one of you heard this story and learned this story many times, but I'm amazed that nobody asks the most basic question on this strange story. What is it that the fox asks the fish, and he suggests, Taru li aboshe v'radu biyachad kishem shedaru avotai em avoteichem. When did that transpire? When exactly and where exactly were the forefathers of the fox and the forefathers of the fish living together? Not even in Noah's Ark, not even the Tevas Noach, because the Gemara says, and Rashi brings it out, that the fish weren't in the Teva, the fish weren't in the Ark, the fish stayed in the oceans and in the seas and in the rivers. So when were the forefathers of the fish and the fox living together? Even if you would ask Charles Darwin, he You would say maybe in the seas, but not on land. And the Shual says, Talu yevasha v'nodu b'yachad k'shem shedoru avosayim aviseichem. So obviously it's a blatant lie. And if I would be a fish in that pond, in that river, maybe I was, but there's no way for me to remember. If I would be a fish and I would be asked to respond, I would say, Atahu shomrim alecha pikech shebachayis otolo pikech atay letipesh atay. You're not only a tippish, you're a liar as well. Because it never was. So how does he dare to suggest that? Well, a professional liar knows that if he has enough chutzpah and metzach nechusha, yes, you say a lie once and again, and again, and again, and people will start believing. It's amazing and terrifying that there are so many Makhishe Shoah out there. So many professors and intelligent people that deny the Holocaust. Ein hachai makhish asachai. Survivors are still living amongst us. How could they have such a chutzpah? But they do have. And if you lie without even blinking an eye, again and again, some people will believe you. So the Shual has chutzpah enough to suggest to the fish, why don't you come up here and we'll live together as our forefathers lived together. They never lived together. And that's an argument we, Am Hatorah, hear in every generation. Different formulations, different versions, different variations, but it's always the same argument. Why do you have to be different than all of us? Why can't you just come up here and let's live together as our forefathers lived together? And I think the first one that came up with that suggestion was Lavan Arami when he tells Yaakov, why do we have to part? Why can't we just be together? We're all the same, so why do you have to be different? All your children are scholars. Everybody has to learn Torah. Why can't you just be like all of us? And we say, we cannot be like all of you. And we cannot live on land because you're a land animal. We're fish. We were born in the ocean. And that is the only place we can live. Anachnu chayot yam, lo chayot yabasha. We were born in Yam HaTalmud. And when we first opened our eyes, the first sight we experienced was Moshe Rabbeinu v'shnei luchos habris. HaYehudi v'haSefer kruchim yardu min hashamayim. That is the way we live. So the fish tell the fox, with all due respect, you stay out there and don't try to dictate to us how we are supposed to live. Yes, it is in the water that we are comfortable. It is in the water that we live, and we cannot live elsewhere. Ki hein chayenu v'orech yomeh. Torah nimshela l'mayim. Torah nimshela gam la'esh. So, the Kidvei HaKodesh and in Divrei Chazal, we find numerous sources. Torah nimshela l'mayim. Ma mayim chayim le'olam. Af Torah chayim le'olam. And that is the mashal of Rabbi Akiva. Torah nimshelo la'esh. How? Why? So the first experience of Moshe Rabbeinu, the first revelation was V'hinei hasneh boyer be'esh v'hasneh eineno ukar. And the Balaturim says that the fire of the thorn bush, of the sneh, is the same fire as the fire of Sinai. Hasneh and Sinai are the same gematria. And Moshe stands bewildered and amazed. How could it be? The bush is burning and it's not consumed. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself out of the fire, and Moshe understands. Yes, fire is a positive force in the world. Fire gives warmth, it gives light, it gives energy. The first person that discovered a natural source of energy was the first discoverer, Adam HaRishon. Mitzvah Shabbos, it became dark. It became cold. He was afraid. And he found two rocks. And he rubbed once against the other, and he discovered fire. But fire is also a terrible destructive force. And how many cases were in their history in which entire cities were consumed by fire? So Moshe Rabbeinu's very first revelation is Eish Hasneh, that is the fire of Har Sinai. Vasneh boer beish, vasneh eineno ukal. The fire of Torah gives warmth, it gives light. It does not destroy. It does not consume. So, Torah nimshel al hamayim, v'Torah nimshel al ha'esh. And in this week's parsha, Parshas Bamidbar, we find in Medrash one of the first passages. B'shloishe devorim nitnu Torah, b'eish, b'mayim, u'bamidbar. Eish and mayim are two natural forces. Torah is symbolized by both. Water is life. Eish is energy and strength. And both are in Torah. The Torah is our sustenance. So merely understanding and appreciating what Torah means in our life as individuals, as communities, as a people, that is what defines us, and is what kept us going throughout the ages. And that is the guarantee of our future, the chinuch of our children. So approaching Chag HaShavuos, I think that is the most important and the most essential ingredient, and probably the most basic way to prepare ourselves for Kabbalat. Just appreciating what Torah should mean in our lives. However, the Yerushalmi, in many different sources, Pei Daf Beis and Shvias Daf Gimel, Shabbos Yud Aleph, Sukkot Daf Yud Ches, and Ksubas Yud Aleph, the Yerushalmi says. On this very same posuk, Yehi Chayechem, Amos Yehi Chayechem, Bizman She'atem Yigeim Ba. So whatever you learn, however you learn, wherever you learn, you're mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And twice in Shas and Adorm Daf Ches and Manochas Tzadik Tes, the Gemara says, "Afilu lo kara ala pasuk echad shacharit." B'pasuk echad aravit, he was mekayim the mitzvah of Ogisa b'yom v'alayla. But to derive life of Torah, that demands toil. Ematai hi chayechem bizman she'atem yigeim. So many years ago, we thought that Yigiyas HaTorah, Omer HaTorah, oh, that's for koilalim, that's for yeshivas. No, it is for each and every one of us. Because we all say every day in the morning, Ki heim chayenu v'oirech yomeinu. And there's another Yerushalmi in Brochas Samach Esem Adalef. I assume it's just enough to say Brochas Samach Esem, and everybody should know it's Yerushalmi. In Babli, we don't have Brochas Samach Esem. So Brochas is one of the only two Masechtas in Shas in which the Yerushalmi is longer than the Babli. I won't tell you which the other one is. Go through the Yerushalmi and you'll find it. So in the very last passage in Yerushalmi Masechet Brachot we learn Omer Rabbi Loza. מה התינוק הזה יונק משתי אמו בכל שעות שביום? אף כל אחד מישראל צריך להתייגע בתורה בכל שעה שביום. So יגיעת התורה, נאמר התורה, is incumbent upon each and every one of us. So years ago, it really was a challenge, and maybe it was more than could be expected. Hard-working people, not yeshiva-like, between Mincha and Marav, they want to learn. So they learn Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, they learn the Gemara, but today, we have such an abundance of possibilities with Schottenstein and Tiftan. I don't even know what else is available. You know, I'm an old-timer. I belong to a different time, but today, every shul has a wonderful shiurim. Everybody could partake in the magnificent experience of Amal Hatorah, of Simchat. Another message which I would like to convey, and it is extreme importance. Vayichan sham Yisrael neged ahar. Vayichan b'lashon yachid. Chazal's interpretation is Ki'ish echad u'belev echad. The Maharal asks a very fundamental question. When the Jews left Mitzrayim, B'kriyat Yam Suf, the Mechilta, Chazal say, Ra'ata shivcha al hayam, ma shelo ra'a Yechezkel ve'kol ha'nevi'im. Klal Yisrael was elevated to such unbelievable heights. The simpletons were prophets. And the entire people exclaimed, Zeh Keli v'yanveyu. And Chazal's interpretation of Zeh, Oyumarin be'etzba, they pointed their finger as if visualizing, seeing HaKadosh Baruch. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to know HaKadosh Baruch, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ki lo yir'ani ha'odam v'chai. It is impossible. And by Kriyas Yamsef, Oyumarin be'etzba, they pointed their fingers and they said, Zeh Keli v'yanveyu. So why didn't the HaKadosh Baruch Hu give them Torah right there and then? Never again will they all be elevated to such heights. The Maharal explains, they were great, they were huge, they were massive, they were magnificent, but one thing was missing. And without that block, without that brick, without their component, they could not be fitting for Torah. And that is Vayechan Sham Yisrael Ki Ish Echad U'Belev Echad. We were Moitzechein BeHaKadosh Baruch Hu when we were united. And as long as that was missing, they could not receive Torah. We just celebrated 50 years of the Six-Day War. Looking around, most of my adult life, I was the youngster. And it dawns upon me in recent years that in most circles in which I'm active, I'm the elder. Looking at you, well, some of you seem to be my age, many of you seem to be younger. I was 14 years old in the Six-Day War. Young Hasidic boy living in Kiryat Sanz just a year before we came from America. But those memories are so vivid and so clear that those are memories one cannot forget. One could never forget the three magnificent words, Harabayit B'Yadeinu. You don't forget those things, ever. And one cannot forget the overwhelming feeling and elevation of Achdus that just swept the land. The unbelievable Achdus, the Ki'ish Echad U'Belev Echad. Charedi, Dati, Chiloni, yeshiva boys and soldiers hugging each other. how we long for those sights. That is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. That is the way we should be. So if we could just cling on to those moments and live them and relive them once and again, that is the way we were at Har Sinai. Vayichem Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar. And that is part of our challenge and our preparation to Har Sinai, to Chag HaShavuos. Because in the very same way that Chazal teach us, and we say it in Haggadah Shel Pesach, B'chol doreh v'doreh chayav odem l'irus atzmo kilu hu yotza miMitzrayim. In the very same way Chazal teach us, B'chol doreh v'doreh chayav odem l'irus atzmo kilu hu omed b'Har Sinai. And he is the one that shouts out, Na'aseh v'nishu. So we have to relive those moments of unity, of Achdus, and of Kabbalat on Malchus Shemayim B'Yah. So there's an interesting medrash, even maybe a strange medrash. Kishabah Kodesh Baruch Hu litten Torah Yisrael. Nitkapzu umot ha'olam eitzel Bilam. Bilam was the great Gentile prophet. And people of all nations came together to Bilam, and they said, something is happening. Something momentous is happening. Shema mabul ba'al olam. Is it another deluge? And Bilam says, no. Hashem oiz la'amo yitein, Hashem yivorech et amoi v'sholoi. So Rav Meir Shapira, the Lublin Rav, the founder of the Daf Yomi and Yeshiva Strachman Lublin, asked, why did they think it's another Mabul? What does Matan Torah have to do with a Mabul? Do they have anything in common? So Rav Meir Shapira said, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar, Ki Ish Echad V'Lev Echad, which is not very common amongst Jews. And the Yom HaSoilam knew their neighbors. And they knew the Jews are always fighting and wrangling, and in every shul you have 3 different parties, and every 10 people have 20 different opinions and philosophies and approaches to everything and different affiliations. And suddenly all the Jews are hugging each other and embracing each other, and what an unbelievable achdus. And so they came to think. The Chazon of Yeshayahu Hanavi, of Yemaisa Moshiach, is a vision of peace, of harmony. V'gar zevem keves, v'namer im gedir bas. So Rav Meir Shapira asked, we knew that in the past. So what is so unique about Yemaisa Moshiach? We knew that from Teves Noach. All the beasts, all the animals were in the Teva. The lion was there and the sheep was there. The mule and the wolves, the garza v'em keves, v'namerim gidir bas. It already happened. So what's so unique about the Chazon of Yeshayahu? So Rav Meir Shapira explained, well, there are different forms and types of unity. When there is a shared threat and a shared danger, it brings people together. In times of war, and when there is an external threat, people unite to face a common danger. So it's no wonder that in Teves Noach, the lion and the mule and the leopard and the wolves and the sheep lived together. Nobody had appetite anyway. When the Mabul raged outside, but liyosed lavoi v'chitatu charavotam leitim v'chanitoteim lemasmerot. It'll be a peaceful atmosphere with no external threat. That is the chazayim of real unity and real achdus and real ahava. That is the chazayim of achdus and yod. So though Mr. Whiteman saw this brotherly love amongst the Jews, all united, so they asked, is that a model? What type of an actus is that? Is something awful coming upon us? Is some external threat threatening to destroy humanity, to destroy the world? What brought the Jews together? And Bilam said, no, this time it's the real thing. That is the actus of Torah. Hashem oz la'amo yiteh neinos el Torah Hashem yavorech estam v'shol. That is the actus of Achros Hayomim. That is the actus of Talmidei Chachamim. Marbim Shalom Lo. So, my dear friends, I'm happy to be together with you the last week before Shavuos. And I think each and every one of us has to take upon himself Al Torah, Al Malchus Shemayim B'Yahava. Take upon himself to dedicate more time, more energy, more passion for Torah. More passion for Torah and more compassion to our fellow Jews. So the combination of passion and compassion is what it's all about. Passion ben odom l'makom and compassion ben odom l'chaveiro. And those are probably the two most important messages I could convey approaching Chag HaShavuos. Kviyasitim l'Torah, more passion for Torah, for study of Torah, for chinuch for Torah, and far more compassion. So we are approaching the end of Yemei HaSfira. Yemei HaSfira originally were days of joy, of celebration, that were transformed to sorrow and to mourning. When the tragedy befell us, when an entire generation of Talmidei Chachamim perished, Chav Dalad Elef Talmidei Rebbe Akiva, Shaloi Nagu Kavod Zeh. And many say, why were they punished so harshly? You are Talmidim of Rebbe Akiva, and you learn nothing from your great Rebbe. Isn't he the one that said, how could you, of all people, not respect each other? However, this interpretation is not very reasonable. Because Chazal don't say, Meisu ben Pesach la'atzeres mishum shelo ahavu ze et ze. Maybe they did love each other. Meisu ben Pesach la'atzeres mishum shelo nahagu kavod ze. It's not the same. Maybe related in a way, but not the same. So I'm sure we all remember, Rebbe Akiva says, "V'yahavtu l'rechu k'moichu zeh klal gadol b'Torah." Doesn't appear anywhere in Bible. The source is Torah's Koyanim and Parshas Kedoshim, and Yerushalmi, 9th Perek of Masechet Nidot. So everybody recalls Rebbe Akiva's statement, "V'yohavtu l'rechu k'moichu zeh klal gadol b'Torah." Very few people remember that Ben Azai disputes Rebbe Akiva. And Ben Azai says, Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam Klal Gadol Heimeno. We could all appreciate what Rebbe Akiva says. But what does Ben Azai argue? What's so great, significant, central about the Posek? Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam. So my feeling is this. Rebbe Akiva and Ben Azai voice different opinions and argue. What is the most basic, most fundamental ingredient of a humane, just, Torah-dicke society? What is the bedrock of a Torah society? Rebbe Akiva says, you have to l'rechu k'mo. Ben Azai says, no, I don't think so. Because love by its very nature cannot be universal, it cannot be uniform. That's the way Kadosh Baruch Hu created us. We love some people more than we love others. We are attracted to some people and we have great difficulty loving others. Ben Azai says, respect, not love. Respecting each other is more fundamental than loving each other, because we need to learn to respect those that we don't love or we have difficulty loving. So Ben Azai says, Zeh Sefer told us Odom B'Tzelem Elokim Boro Weiss. The recognition and the feeling that each and every one of us was created B'Tzelem Elokim, and to our Kodesh Baruch Hu, we're all the same, because we all are His children. That is the way Chazal define us. Bonov Shel Elokeinu, and a father loves all his children and wants good for them all. And I could almost hear Ben Azai saying, "The Kiva, don't be angry at me. It's not my Torah, it's your Torah. Yes, you're the one that says, Niyushalmi v'yahavtorecho kamoicho, zekar gadol b'Torah. But aren't you the one that taught us in Perek Gimel of Masechet Avos, Cholav Odom shenivro b'Tzelem, Chibi Yaseder nodat lo, shenivra b'Tzelem Elokim." So Ben Azai says, I think what's even more important is, that Sefer told us all, the B'Tzelem Elokim bara. So this is a challenge. Yes, we do have a mitzvah v'yohavtorecho kamoicho. But we also, it's not enough to love each other. We need to respect each other. And we need to respect some that might have different approaches and feelings and opinions that are then our own. And that is part of the Yichem Sham Yisrael Ki Ish Echad U'Bedech Echad. The common goal and common beliefs and common aspirations to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'Lekadesh Shem Shemayim. So what bracha can I give you all? As individuals, we should all come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should have nachas from us, and we should have nachas from our children. You should all be zoicha to bona chayim, ezoyna ravicha, and we should all together be zoicha lekabel ol Torah, b'ol malchus shemayim b'yavo. And this beautiful kahila should grow and prosper and come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'ahavas Torah or b'yirat shamayim. And we should all be zoicha in the schus of Talmud Torah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yirachem aleinu, v'yishlach lanu Moshiach tzidkenu, v'yivneh lanu Beit Mikdashenu v'tifartenu v'mheiro v'yomeinu. Amen.